And welcome to each and every one of you this morning. I was just about to say, it's absolutely thrilling for us to see a tremendous turnout like this. But I guess we shouldn't really be surprised, because if there's one thing that all of us are passionate about in this city, it is, what does our future hold? And what's it going to look like? And what can we do? How can we use our ideas to inform the process that we need to do together in a very short time frame as we lay out some future vision? I would just like to say, first of all today, although we are focusing here today on really a discussion around the central part of our city, within the 4 avenues, including Hagley Park, that does not mean that in any way, as an organisation, from the City Council's point of view, and I can speak also on behalf of Sarah and Minister Brownlee, that in any way there is still not full emphasis, full energy, full commitment to working right across the fabric of the city. And there is an immense amount of work going on there, and like you, we're hanging out for that information that should come in via the central government agency around the condition of our land beneath our city, because therein lies quite a tale, one that we've all shared in a way that none of us ever imagined we would. And I think people say, there's an incredible flowering of community spirit and an incredible strength in Canterbury, and what does that come from? And I think a huge amount of it comes from the fact that we, as a community, have experienced something which is just about utterly unique in history. I guess you could look back to, there have been other cities that have been devastated in other parts of the world, that is true. You could look back at places and cities that were devastated in the Second World War. And or in other wars, I guess, they never seem to run out of ideas for wars, and thank goodness we haven't had to fight them in recent times right on our shores here. But we are tied together in a way that few people are, and it started on the 4th of September at 4:35 a.m. in the morning, when that 7.1 earthquake took place up on the plains west of the city. And for at least 40 to 45 seconds, I think we all shared, as a community, as a city and as a province, a common fear, a common feeling of concern, probably for our own lives at that point, certainly for the lives of the people around us. And as that earthquake went from that thing that we'd all experienced together, that little bump that we'd all had wherever you are in New Zealand, we're not unfamiliar with that. That's the country we live in. But there was that feeling that began to dawn after 5 or 6 seconds as it began to get stronger, that this was the big one. And many of us thought, well, if it's that bad here, it must be bloody awful in Wellington. And, it wasn't going to be us. That was, certainly once you got out of those personal thoughts of family and your loved one and whether you're going to live, you start thinking about the further afield members of your family. And then we found out it was here. And then as we found out day after day after day, basically coming from a position of seismic naivety for me and most of us really, we began to realize that something was happening beneath our feet, that you have to pinch yourself to believe that we would find ourselves in the middle of this thing. And then as the months went by and we began to get closer to that rebuild phase, as we began to sort out some of the massive issues that were in front of us, the like of which we'd never seen before. And you think back to where we were on the 21st of February, probably, happy about some things, grumping about some other things, fed up with this, pleased about that. Just normal life to a degree, a little different, but, just us making the best, no lives lost. On the afternoon of the 22nd of February, and I still cannot believe it when I think that here in this place, in our city, we lost so many people. 181 people, it's believed, the final death toll will be. And if the first earthquake changed the fabric of our city, and we debated about what we could do going forward, and we had to recognise that we still had much of the fabric there, then the quake on the 22nd of February disavowed us of any thoughts that we could just patch it up and move on again. And how do we move forward? And I talked at the memorial service about one of the ways that we move forward as a community is that we can focus on the lives that we have lost and the dreams that were shattered at that moment and say, what was it that those who gave their lives in our city, because it could have been you or me, we all know this. These were the buildings that we go in and out of. These are the streets down which we had walked. This is the landscape of our lives, and it took lives from our midst. And we have to honour that in some way. And so what we are doing here today and what we have started with the Share an Idea Visioning campaign, online first of all, and then here today, and in the weeks ahead it will begin to unfold. It will evolve into much more of a two-way conversation. But as we do that, the one thing that we really need to know as a city is, what is it that our people want? What is the protection we have against any one interest group saying we should dominate this thing with our ideas? And the response to that is very simple. The people of this city have the ideas. They may not have every answer, although most days I hear a few dozen of them from people who stop me and say, look, you've just got to do this, you know. And we realise that this wealth of energy and desire and caring is also part of our healing process as a city, that we must have input to this thing. And we understand the fears and concerns that, oh my God, you know, we just don't want the City Council telling us what it's going to be. We don't always agree with them. We just don't want Wellington imposing their vision on us. We don't want some overseas expert to tell us exactly how it should be, because this is our place. This is our family story. It is our blood that is in the soil. And that is why it is our right to shape this process from the bottom up. And it's also our protection, I believe, as a community. So I'm incredibly excited. Over 3,500 hits on the pages of our website, the Share an Idea, and they're really, really invigorating. They're really exciting, and they're really challenging. For what we have to do as a community is do this process on a relatively short time scale. Now, some will say, well, no, this is about the next millennium. You should take as long as it takes to do it. And I understand exactly where that comes from. But on the other hand, we also need to balance this against our need to save the economy of our city. We need to balance this against the need of business and lives and residents to get back to normal. And so there is a very important pressure in the other direction to make sure this happens in a timely way. So some of the big parameters that will be affecting us will be things like the report around the ground conditions, and Minister Brownlee, who is here today, who has, I've got to say, as I said to him at an elected rep meeting the other night, an encyclopedic knowledge of what's going on. There seems to be no aspect of this thing which is appropriate as minister, but it's very refreshing to see that the detail and the understanding and the passion he has is part of what he's bringing to the job. And he might just touch on the issue around the timing of the release of the information around ground conditions. We've got other speakers here today. We've got Kai Whakahaere of Kai Tahu, Mark Solomon, kia ora Mark, tēnā koe. Wonderful to have you here with us as well. And Ngāi Tahu is very much involved in this planning process. So Ngāi Tahu sit as our partners in this nation of ours, enshrined in the planning law, enshrined in the legislation, and enshrined in this process as all citizens of Christchurch. But a special place for Ngāi Tahu. And also we've got, of course, the representative today, David Cagle. Welcome along, David, who's going to be speaking to us. And David is one of the commissioners on Environment Canterbury, former cabinet minister, very much involved in the affairs of not just the city, but certainly very focused on the province that we have. And there are many other members of Parliament here. I can see Nikki Wagner. I think I saw Leanne Dalzell, Brendan Burns was here, Clayton Cosgrove was here. There may be others, and if I'm missing you, we'll just throw something at me a little bit later on. And of course my mum and dad are here as well somewhere, so vitally important people in the Parker household. Lovely to have you here. And we're going to get a bit of an overview of what is happening. But once again, the most important thing about this is you, actually. and what you bring to this process. So God bless you, and thank you for being here this morning. Your passion has brought you here. Your concern has brought you here. And I hope also your sense of optimism of what we can be has brought you here, because what we can be is something we didn't have a chance to be before. What we can be is truly a city poised to take on the challenges of the 21st century. And as our forebears, whether it was 1,000 years ago, those mighty navigators, maybe the greatest navigators we've known, travelled across the Pacific to settle this place, to make it home, so too have successive groups, and a large group of our forebears from the European side of this bicultural nation settled here to build a new city in 1850. And they were reformers. We shouldn't forget that. They didn't come here because they wanted to make a buck, actually. Well, probably some of them did, and there was an element of that, I'm sure. But a large amount of the intellectual process behind the settlement from the European perspective of the city was brought about by reformers. And you can track our city back to Henry VIII. It was Henry VIII who started Christ Church at Oxford. It was a university to study all of those wonderful things, all the learnings that were available, but with a balanced approach that spirituality and the real values of life, the non-material things that make us special, they were to be kept in balance. And these reformers out of this college, now in the 1800s, looked for a place as the Industrial Revolution began to take hold in Europe. And they looked for a place to come, to build a balanced community between the environment and craft and trade and study and religion, spirituality. And I think we can turn to that and say, in a way, that 19th century way of applying it is also something that has value today in the 21st century. So let's do something magnificent together as a city and as a province. It will never please all of us to every degree, but we have a responsibility together to ensure that our children and their children and generations, not just for the next 150 years, the equivalent of the time from founding to this point, but for the next millennium, this is the opportunity to look at what we have and make those fundamental changes. Before I finish and pass on to the next speaker, I just want to acknowledge our councillors. We've got, I think, just about a full complement of councillors. Where are you, team? Can you raise and wave your hands? So would you mind just standing up so that we can identify you later on for buttonholing purposes? So my wonderful Deputy Mayor, Nari Button, is there. Claudia Reid, Councillor Helen Broughton. I can see Councillor Jimmy Chen. I think I can see Councillor Tim Carter, Councillor Yanni Johansson. I saw Councillor Glenn Livingston. Have I missed anybody that's not here yet? Oh, sorry, and Chrissy is here as well, Councillor Chrissy Williams. Sally Buck is here. They keep appearing out of the woodwork, don't they? It's amazing. And it's just a thrill to have you here. We'll be here for the next 2 days.